like to start off by introducing our panelists. First, we have Ben Haas, who's VP of Engineering at Call9. We have some Call9ers here. Call9 is, which some of you obviously know, is a New York mission-led startup that provides a technology platform that delivers bedside access to emergency physicians, specifically to people in nursing homes and rehabilitation centers, which is a much underserved community. We also have Nick Horelick, who is co-founder. Some of you from RapidSOS are here. RapidSOS is a New York-based mission-critical startup that partners with Internet of Things data sources and government agencies to make location and other life-saving data from enabled devices available to 911 and first responders. And we also have David Crane, who's Director of Engineering at Donors Choose. I'm sure some of you are here, who have graciously provided the donation cards for you guys to choose where to donate tonight. Donors Choose is a New York-based nonprofit founded by a Bronx school teacher, and they build a crowdfunding platform that connects American public school teachers in high-need communities with donors that donate directly to classroom projects. So with that, my job is easy tonight. It's really just to prompt some questions so you can hear more from each of these startups. Let's start off by talking a little bit about each of your founding stories and what social impact you're focused on. And maybe you can also tell us a little bit about how you're measuring that impact, a few interesting stats about your business, and anything else you'd like to tell us.
We deliver location data and other data to 911 from iOS and Android handsets, as well as other connected devices. We were founded in early 2014 after it was one of my co-founders had a negative experience. He didn't end up getting mugged, but he felt like he was about to, and he realized he could call an Uber faster than he could get out his phone and dial 911 and have a conversation about where he was. And then we linked up and realized it's a little bit ridiculous that maybe a lot of people don't realize that when you call 911, it's actually rather rare that they have really accurate location data prior to what we were doing. We felt it was a bit ridiculous that in the modern era, people think you call 911 and it's like CSI Miami and they have all this information about you, but they don't. So we made it our mission to try to rectify that. We went through a whole bunch of different phases, as all startups do. But now we're delivering about location for about 30,000 911 calls per day in the US and growing, and starting to look at international expansion as well.
Hello, I'm David Crane with DonorsChoose.org. So our mission is to make it easy for anyone to help a classroom in need. But an anecdote, when I was in the 3rd grade, the whole back of the classroom was a row of chapter books, and we got to check one out and do a book report every week. And the kids across the hall got to do it too. They got to come into our room to get a book. And I didn't realize until much later, but my teacher, Mrs. Henderson, was buying all of those books. And this is a serious problem in this country. There's a serious underfunding problem. There's a gap of about $1 billion that teachers are filling, with out-of-pocket spending, like Mrs. Henderson did. So in 2000, Charles Best, our founder, was a high school teacher in the Bronx, and he started Donors Choose to help connect donors and teachers. And we have a whole process to support donors making donations. Well, first teachers making requests, and then donors making donations, and everything that has to happen in between. We deliver materials to the schools, so we have to do the purchase ordering. Amazon is actually our largest vendor at this point. That whole process needs to be supported. So statistics, we are going to do $140 million in classroom materials delivered this year.
I think the easiest way to understand the motivation behind Call9 and why Call9 exists is with a story about one of our physicians, Dr. G. One day, Dr. G went to the hospital because her father had been sent there for a bladder infection, and found him restrained. And she went to the front desk and asked why he'd been restrained, and they told Dr. G that it was because he kept trying to eat, and they hadn't done a swallow test yet, so he wasn't allowed to eat yet. So she went back and this was back when restraints were legal in New York, and she cut the restraints off him, took him home, back to his home. He was, she gave him a swallow test because she's a doctor and was able to do that. And so eventually Dr. G got him palliative care, which is end of life care, to figure out what his wishes were and the way he wanted to live. And he was able to die in peace. But this story about Dr. G is an incredibly common one that happens all the time in our emergency rooms. There are patients, and some statistics about this: 19% of 911 calls are coming from nursing homes. And there's this cycle where patients get sick, and when they're in a nursing home, they get sick, they go to the ER, they come back sicker than they went, and they just go into this downward spiral. And so, really, the reason Call 9 exists, and Call 9 was founded by ER doctors, is to break that cycle, to treat the patients in their beds using a 24/7 paramedic who's in that facility to break that cycle. We've treated over 4,000 patients since Call 9 started. We're treating more than 600 a month now. And some interesting stats, like I said, 19% of 911 calls are coming from SNFs. 2/3 of those are for things like dehydration and bladder infections, which are easily avoidable. 15% of Americans are using Medicare, and $40 billion of Medicare spending is going towards these unnecessary hospital trips that are happening.
So I think that's something that a lot of you in the audience probably share, is knowing how hard it is to get a startup off the ground. So I'd like to hear from each of you about your MVP phases, kind of what you went through. And Ben, maybe we'll start with you, because I know that one of your founders actually lived in a nursing home for 3 months to get the organization off the ground. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So our CEO and our original founder, Tim Peck, is an emergency physician who spent his entire life training to be an ER doctor, and he got a faculty position at Harvard, which is an incredible accomplishment. And almost immediately, as soon as he got that position, he quit and went to go to Y Combinator to start Call 9 because of this problem that he saw occurring while he was working there. And he sent messages to 2,000 nursing homes wanting to try this model. 3 of them got back to him, which I think is about standard for what you'd expect for blind messaging people. The one that he ended up working with, the admin asked him to live there while he was trying out this experiment to treat these patients in their beds in the facilities instead of just sending them out, which he did. He had identified over the course of those 3 months why this cycle was happening, why there's no diagnostic equipment in nursing homes. There's a 1-to-30 nurse to patient ratio, that PCPs aren't there at the time of emergency, and they're not coming very often to see these people who need treatment. I think it's hard a little bit for me to say what he learned. I think what I admire about what he did at that time, I think is he immediately found a way to provide value to these people, to the nursing home staff, while he was doing in this discovery phase. And just as we were doing this, I remember, sitting in these nursing homes, we'd find some change or want to make some change, and we'd make it right away, see how it worked. We had him there providing that safety net, providing the treatment, but just that commitment to iterating quickly and providing value immediately.
David, how did you get started?
Well, I wasn't there. It was 18 years ago, so we're kind of a geriatric startup at this point. But I was there for this thing called national expansion, where we went from focusing on New York City and then a few other states, I think, as I joined, and then we suddenly went nationwide. So we've had a big challenge with that growth, but we've gone through that now. I think we've got a program that we'll be able to scale with. But we have grown 30% every year. 11 years that I've been with the company. That's huge. We're at this point we're 155 million in revenue. We've got 1 million in our donor base, and we expect to fund 255,000 projects this school year. So yeah, our big challenge was how to scale something that we had started as a very small nonprofit.
And we'll come back to the scaling element in a few minutes. And Nick?
We realized that we were one of many, actually, of such folks that would go to, there was a technical staff at the National Emergency Number Association that represents some of the public safety answering point, PSAT communities across the country. And basically every week they would be dealing with shooting down ideas of people spinning up an app or spinning up a website, who just kind of think they know what the public safety workflows are when they really don't. There's a hell of a lot of operational aspects at a dispatch center for how a call taker needs to handle a call. and process it and move it through. And, of course, privacy and security implications and, deploying into a government network is not a trivial thing. The way we had started, we plowed forwards anyways. We started out as an app company, actually, and made a calling application where you could press a button in an iOS and Android app and connect via VoIP or a PSTN phone call through our system to an E911 entry point using the type of VoIP suppliers that VoIP phone systems in buildings use. When like the Polycoms, you can call 911 from them. We added all sorts of features to it to do texting back and forth, to do video, to do pictures, all sorts of things that nobody at a PSAP could consume. But we were getting in through the normal mechanisms through voice. And that, to do a robust voice application that is for emergency services, so the voice can't drop when you like move an app from a Wi-Fi to a network, a data network, it was an incredible amount of investment and time. And eventually we realized that, everyone is trained from a very young age to call 911, and nobody's going to take out their phone and press a button in an app to call 911. So that was a very expensive, difficult lesson that we learned. We're bringing this to every single public safety conference and testing it we tested in every jurisdictional, there's a lot of ways to slice it, but every jurisdictional different morphology in the US, doing live 911 calls across the country. And what that led us to really understand is what the public safety standards are, what their operational workflows are, and really kind of embed ourselves in the public safety community. And then that eventually led us to pivot and finally achieve getting it embedded in the operating system. And so we will be finally deprecating and turning off that Haven application actually next week. It was definitely a learning experience from a product perspective, I would say.
And what was the time it took from switching from the first version?
We took a long time to really launch it because, because of the amount of risk that we would be taking on when we say, if you press this button, you're going to be talking to 911. So we actually went through a whole bunch of iterations, like 3 or 4 full rewrites before we actually launched it live. So that took like 1.5 years, 2 years almost, before we eventually launched it and realized that we needed to pivot.
David, you touched upon this in your introduction. I think we all know that crowdfunding lets donors support a wide range of projects, but there can be problems, which we've all heard about, when projects aren't vetted. So you mentioned that you have a full back-end system to vet the projects. Can you tell us a little more about that?
We have, in the last few years, we've revamped 2 processes that people use. Teachers can now go in and build their projects very easily, much more easily than before. We've increased by 1/3 the completion rate, the conversion for people who start, by making it simpler for them to just choose the materials that they need. They do online shopping, for them to build their essay describing their classroom. We've also revamped this thing called Teachers as Screeners, so that the teachers we've got a panel of 200 teachers. That's really the answer. We have 200 master teachers who volunteer time to screen projects for us. We actually have 2 people on staff which are user experience researchers, and they are constantly revising things so that to remove friction and make it possible to do things. That's really it. We have a passion for scalability of everything, so we scale all the things with technology. That is what we do, and that's mostly what I do too.
Thank you. That actually transitions really well into the next question, which is really about each of you have addressed a serious problem that has a very human element to it by using technology. But sometimes it must be hard to keep that human element. And I think, Ben, you're the perfect person to talk about that. And then I'm sure some of the patients have concerns about receiving care virtually through your technology. How have you managed to keep that feeling very human?
The population of people in nursing homes is not does not have a lot of overlap with the technically savvy population, if that makes sense. It's the people who we're providing treatment for, they often don't understand, who's this doctor on the television, what's going on. And so a critical piece that we discovered early on was that we needed somebody in the SNF putting their hands on the patient, providing that care directly. That's why our CCS team, which is our team of paramedics and EMTs who are in the facility providing the day-to-day treatment, is so important to what we do. They're providing that human element for the patient. And one of the things that we're starting to do beyond provide care immediately during the time of these deteriorations, during the time of emergency, when a heart attack is happening, when kidney failure is happening, is looking at how the human element can actually affect hospitalization rates before the deterioration happens. And there's studies which show doing stuff like rounding on people, giving them cranberry juice every 6 hours, just talking to them, making sure they're okay, can have significant impacts on hospitalization rates and how often people start deteriorating. And that's something we're starting to experiment with too, is taking our model and taking it to that next step. So really the human element is vital to getting outcomes, getting to preventing these hospitalizations and preventing these deteriorations from happening.
So let's dive a little bit more into the technology. So obviously every startup runs into technology challenges on the way. And can each of you share some technical decisions that you made early that you wish you had thought more about the architectural implications before you made those?
One of the earlier architectural, questions would have been to really think a little bit harder about how we would do VoIP, in-app VoIP, just because it's a significant challenge to do correctly and very robustly for an emergency services use case. We were actually Oracle's first cloud customer for their session border controller, which is typically something that carriers deploy hardware blades in their core networks for this. So we basically, I've always taken the stance that I never wanted to deal with physical infrastructure and wanted everything always on Amazon. They sold it to us in a virtualized manner, but it made it a little bit difficult to deploy in a high availability configuration. That's one decision. I would have also wanted to start much earlier with automated orchestration tools to manage deployments.
I would caution anybody who's wanting to start something, focus on your data model. You know, it's inherently stable, by which I mean you're never going to change it. I mean, any change is going to ripple throughout your system, and there's going to be tremendous resistance and pain if you change it. So I want to tell you a story about gift cards. You're all going to get one of these in your swag bag. You should take it, you know, and go spend it on our site. You're spending someone else's money. Do it. Pick a project. So the thing is, these gift codes, we implemented something called gift codes, which is on your card, and gift purchases. And this was what they were for. But then they got repurposed because people needed to transfer funds, and it seems like a transfer. You know, it's a way for one account to pay for another account's donation. And it started, so imagine now your marketing and partnerships team talking to your accounting team to explain their 10-part naming conventions for gift purchases. Yeah. Well, we've re-implemented things now. We've got something called cradle to grave, so we track every penny from source to destination. But the thing is, we still are plagued by some monster database queries, you know, pulling in, I don't know, 1 million gift codes for one of the purchases from back in the day. So anyway, yeah, pay attention to your database schema, and you know, really, you got to think through this in advance.
I think some of the most costly mistakes we have made have been around choices we've made with external software we end up using. We've made some expensive mistakes in which billing software we use, for example. If I was doing it all over again, taking more time to do the evaluation period, think about the trade-offs, the compromises, including with stuff like the data model, which we're also feeling some pain on, and as we're making some changes to that. And you know, it's definitely real, that pain. Taking the time to do those evaluations and pick the right piece of external software to use. It's so expensive to switch a billing system. If you're a company that's doing healthcare billing, it takes so much time to integrate with one of these things. Recognizing how long it's going to take, we've just gotten integrated with Point Click Care, which was one of the major nursing home EMRs. And it took literally 2 years of negotiations and back and forth to get to that point. To, you know, taking the time up front, evaluating, and before you jump in and start building stuff, as tempting as it is to do that.
Keeping on the technology theme, and assuming that a lot of you are building startups on AWS, could you talk a little bit about the AWS services you're using to scale and optimize your business, and specific components that are important to your architecture?
At the moment, we're actually we're replatforming on AWS. But what we have now, our data team hosts all of their systems in our data science team in Amazon. So they're using AWS, they're using Redshift, which is, it's a great product. A relational database, I'm fond of those, but it's great. And that allows all of our staff to democratize sort of data analysis. I mean, all these millennials are business analysts. It's kind of insane, but it's great. And we've empowered them through Redshift. And they use, other things to automate stuff. We are going to be using EKS and RDS as our essential platform. We're going from a virtual machine world, and we'll be running them as containers in EKS. I was bought over yesterday when you fixed the late-breaking, incredibly horrible security bug, within 24 hours.
A lot of what we do relies on sort of the simple high availability architectures of load balancers and auto scaling, expanding clusters. Everything that we run is on Kubernetes managed clusters. We always kind of think of treating our servers like cattle, not like pets. So we should be able to slaughter any single one of them at any given moment. We also really make use of the multi-availability zone and multi-region aspect of Amazon, because we have a lot of latency requirements and obviously reliability requirements. We're running a system that's relatively low volume but very high impact for each of those sessions.
I would actually second the notion of the reliability. I mean, the disaster recovery. AWS has made it very simple to reason about that, and it's not something I had to think. I built a full disaster recovery site for the old platform. Oh my gosh, it's just great to have it right in there.
We use AWS, I think, for almost everything we're doing. We're using it for hosting, for acceptance testing, where we have machines running to do our predictive work. I think the differentiator for us with AWS, it's easy to think of hosting as a commodity, but what Amazon, I think, is really doing better than the other companies are is providing the level of service, a higher level of service. When we were getting our penetration test done, they were very responsive, helping us get that set up. When we have questions about which configurations we should have for our EC2 instances, they're always super helpful. It's just a great service to use, and been a very positive experience for us.
Let's talk a bit about emerging technologies. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience are thinking about how you're going to use machine learning, IoT, and obviously we introduced a whole bunch of new services surrounding those last week. So can you talk about services that you're either starting to use or you have a plan for the next phase of your product?
One of the biggest concerns that call takers and administrators in the public safety community have when you think about enabling them to receive all sorts of different types of data feeds, whether it's camera information or smart vehicle information or home security data feeds, is are they going to be overwhelmed? How can someone answering the phone deal with a torrent of information and make good decisions? Ultimately, they need to know what units to send, how many of them, and where. We're very actively looking at using a number of techniques to try to distill and classify that, based on all the information that we're seeing, what the incident actually is.
We have a system they built called Taxonomy that in real time now we can tell what a teacher is putting. We went from 4 categories where the teacher had to manually decide what kind of project it was to 14 where we are learning it through machine learning. And this is a big part of streamlining the process for teachers to submit processes. But we're wanting to take this to do things like see what you've done in the past. And we've seen what other teachers have done that are similar, and hey, here's our suggestions. When we tell donors, when we make project recommendations, right, we do a lot of marketing to pull in donations. We know that people like to give locally. And so we will try to give you local project recommendations, but we also know that 50 to 75% of the funding for projects in a school district, let's say, come from out of state. This is not local giving. What is it? Well, we think that we'll be able to see that with taxonomy and other machine learning. So
if you think about what Call9's model is, we're treating patients in nursing homes. We have a successful model right now that we're using where we're treating patients at the time of emergency to reduce the hospitalization rates, which are very expensive, save money for the people, get better outcomes for the patients, save money for the insurance companies and the payers. But if your goal is to improve the outcomes and reduce the costs, other tools that you can use to do that in the nursing homes. The way where machine learning ties into this is predictions, figuring out who you can intervene on and have the most impact on, using the tools that you have available to you as a company. So we have in the nursing homes already, we have this paramedic available. We have emergency doctors remote. We have palliative doctors remote. And so thinking about before the emergency happens, who can you intervene on? What's the probability that those people are going to be going to the hospital if you don't intervene? What's the probability they're going to be going to the hospital if you do intervene? Which are the ones you can have the biggest impact on? You have a whole bunch of medical data on this patient, and a big part of what we do as a company is take all that data, figure out, this nursing home has it stored this way, this nursing home has it stored this way. This billing file from the insurer is giving us conflicting data. How do we manage that? But taking all that data and trying to use machine learning to predict when, which of those patients you can have the biggest impact on, the biggest positive impact on. This is something we're working on now with a professor at the University of Rochester to develop, is this sort of predictive model, a field with a lot of potential applications for machine learning. But this is just one area where you can use it to have an impact on hospitalizations.
So obviously a lot of our customers are thinking about the next gen technologies like robotics, blockchain, et cetera. So thinking about not just your own organizations, but which of those new, not really heavily utilized technologies yet, do you think will impact the future of tech for good and really have a very positive impact on society?
I think it's machine learning. I mean, it's you can use it for good. You can use it for creepy, but you can use it for good. And I think that the stories that we've told is, I was just the other day, I was like, wow, I was just on a conference call with, teleconferencing call, and as it finally happened, since I was a kid, there was going to be television or teleconferencing, telephone phones. It happened. It's real now. And, AI was also 2001, came out in 72 or something. I think it's real now. And I think it can be used to really see needs and predict needs, and can it really help those teachers, those 200 teachers vetting projects? We're going to be able to actually go in and say, yeah, this is a third grade project, or the screener even sees it. So maybe we'll be able to give them a score. The automated system says, there's a 95% likelihood this is real. That teacher can probably skim that project and approve it. Who knows?
With regards to telemedicine, it's often seen as a supplement to real medicine, to real care. And I think the future is going to be technology that enables it not to be a supplement. So our founder, Tim, is always talking about, he wants VR so he can be in the patient's room, see their family as they're interacting with the patient, get a sense for their condition more directly. And he's just talking about wanting to put his hands on the patient, comfort them, get a sense for where they are at empathetically. So I think the technologies that are going to enable that remote care to happen are going to have a huge impact on the way medicine is practiced.
I would echo the sort of machine learning and AI, as it would potentially help the public safety community respond faster and better. There are already some municipalities that do predictive policing where they'll lay a mesh over their city, and based on historical crime rates and like traffic data and weather data, try to predict where crime will happen. We think we can maybe do that with the centralized data set that we have, not just with crime incidents, but all different types of emergencies. It's going to have to be, to avoid false positives, to avoid overwhelming the system, there's going to have to be some heavy-duty intelligence to do that correctly. So I think a lot of the capabilities are there to do that today. It's just a matter of hooking everything up correctly and thinking through the data models and the flows correctly.
I think that artificial intelligence is not a force for good. I think it can be harnessed for that. I used to think the internet was going to be a good thing. Like in the 90s, I thought, oh, this is it, but a little wrong on that one. But, we'll just have to control the artificial intelligence. That's all I'm saying.
And for those in the audience that are thinking about creating a startup to drive social change or positive social impact, do each of you have any advice, from either a technology or just defining that mission?
I mean, I think I would say use don't be afraid to use the fact that you're driving social good to find people who are going to join your company. It's why I joined Call9, because I came from another company and I wanted to, but that I didn't feel like I was doing social good at, and I wanted to work at Call9 and have that fulfillment. And if you have a group of people who care about that, it will do an enormous amount to bring them together and get through hard times and the difficult times, which will inevitably happen, and the ups and downs that will inevitably happen if you have a group of people who care about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
For us, it was really important to to have a group of people around us that really cared about making a difference and sticking to focusing on the impact of what we're trying to do. There's always a lot of pressures to do things different ways or give up because, at least in our case, everyone kept saying what we're trying to do is not the right way to do it or can't be done because there's all this regulatory stuff and the wireless carriers and the FCC's involved. But everyone's really passionate about it. You can make some of those deals with companies that you might never think you could ever get done because, you're doing things for the right reasons, and people can see that comes across when you try to have negotiations and when you try to roll something out.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of one or more partnerships to your business and maybe something that wouldn't have happened without those?
The majority of our business is based on partnerships. I mean, linking upstream data sources like Android handsets and iOS to consumers on the downstream side. I mean, we partner with companies like Airbus, Motorola. They sell software that does call taking and mapping and dispatch in dispatch centers. So, it's from a technical perspective, it's not rocket science to build a little client to make a query, but it's all about making those partnerships work together. So, we've had to do a lot of pilots. We've had to do a lot of project management, a lot of keeping the glue, gluing all that together. It's been incredibly important to us. Like I said, though, I think one of the biggest things for us was making sure everybody understood that we're doing these things for the right reasons. We're doing them because and if we want to do it the right way, we're going to work with basically everybody that's involved: the carriers, the FCC, the government agencies, all the vendors, and get it done.
Ben, I know you mentioned that very few of the assisted living facilities got back to your founders in the beginning.
I think it is very dependent on the SNF. It's very dependent on people and understanding what motivates them. We partner with 8 SNFs in New York and Long Island, skilled nursing facilities, and we're with several of the major insurance companies have partnered with us to provide in-network rates. Figuring out, like you were talking about, what matters to them, and does your mission matter to them, and why does Aetna care about what I'm doing? Why does Central Island Nursing Home care about what I'm doing? And how are we going to help them? And just coming at it from that perspective, because it's a big ask. You're asking them to take a risk. Maintaining those partnerships, it's hard. It's hard to establish them. It's hard to get rolling. But finding a way to provide value, finding a way to make them care about what you're doing, whether it's the social good aspect, whether it's the potential for growth that you have, I think is key.
And David, you obviously have to work with a lot of schools in addition to managing a huge population of donors. So
we do. We tend not to work directly with the schools. We work with the donors and the teachers. Kind of a movement nonprofit in a way. It's like, not to disparage the school systems, but we're trying to empower teachers. Most nonprofits, we're not like most nonprofits, right? Our teachers are coming to us saying, this is the program I need funded. And the donors are coming to us and saying, this is the program I want to fund. Most nonprofits do one or the other. They either are devising programs for a population, which they then implement, or they are putting out RFPs to decide what it is they want to fund. And we create a marketplace of ideas. Okay, so we have to understand the psychology of donors and teachers. So that's a very important thing, is to understand and build toward that. We have large funders, so we don't have this 500,000 small donors out there. When those type of organizations give, they don't follow the advice of the Sermon on the Mount, which is, when you give alms, your right hand shouldn't let your left hand know what it's doing. They want to tell everyone what they're doing. They do cause marketing, and we understand that, and we are good at it, but so we have partnerships with all of our people that we work with, and all of our vendors and our funders, and in Amazon.
So I'd like to thank our panel, and I think you all are able to stay for a few minutes after. So if you have additional questions that we didn't cover, feel free to seek them out. Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for your attention.